Okay guys, I'm doing it. I might be saying goodbye to my most favorite build of all time, the Hellbender 204. Well, all three of them. All three that are exactly alike. I love all three of these builds to death, and I will always fly them, but I may have a new favorite. For those of you that are just curious of what are my favorite parts, you guys ask me all the time, you're going to see it in this video because I've hand selected all of the parts that I will use for this build. If you haven't yet watched my review for this frame, that link is in the description, and check the description for my full review for the Ready-Made RC rifle motors. These are 2206 by 2550 kV. If you're watching this video today or tomorrow, the link won't be there, but anytime after that it should be. I can't finish the review until I've actually flown them. The bolts that come with the rifle motors are actually the correct length for this frame, but I'll be using Ready-Made RC's TPU motor mounts to soft mount the motors, so I need something a little bit longer. These are 6mm bolts, so I need 8mm, which I have right here. Okay, I've got the motors soft mounted to the frame. I really think that these motors are going to be good. I have always used the Ready-Made RC Blue Series, the original Blue Series motors. They've actually had a version come out since then, and you could think of this as like the V3s. So stepping up from 2204 to 2206 is going to be a pretty big difference. But it hasn't always been about the power. I just love the quality of T-motors. Ready-Made RC pretty much teamed up with T-motor, so you get the Ready-Made RC design with the T-motor manufacturing quality. For the ESCs, I'll be using these. What they're called depends on where you buy them from. They're called the Super Racer Bees. Raceflight sells these, but it's called them something else, and then other websites call them something else. I've been using these for some time. They're rated at 30 amps and D-Shot 600 capable. When I mount these ESCs to the frames, I use this double-sided sticky mounting tape, whatever you want to call it. It's basically just foam tape. I'm going to put 2 of these on the bottom side and then solder up the motor wires, and before I wrap this in electrical tape, I'm going to put 2 more on top. Okay, now I'm going to mount the PDB. The one that I've chosen is the Ready-Made RC Hellbender PDB, which was made for the Hellbender frame, but I've been using this PDB on all my frames, Ready-Made RC frame or not. I just love how simple it is. There's no pads on the backside, so I can wrap it in electrical tape and mount it directly to the frame. I don't need any voltage regulators because of the video transmitters I use, which I'll get to in a little bit. The bolts that come with this frame kit are these. They are tapered because the bottom side holes are tapered. This allows you to mount the battery flat without any bolts sticking out and getting in the way, because when you crash they could, poke at your battery and damage the battery. But these fit flush. The problem is it's too long. Well, it's not too long, but I don't want a steel bolt going through my flight controller. I would prefer a plastic standoff, but what's even better than a plastic standoff is going to be these vibration absorbers that Ready-Made RC also sells. To use these, we need to use a shorter bolt. These came from a local hardware store only because I didn't realize I was out of the ones that I normally get from Ready-Made RC. They're M3 by 10mm long. You can also use 8mm long, and I'll show you the difference in just a second. Okay, I've placed 2 strips of electrical tape going this way and then 2 more going this way, then poked holes for the bolt holes. Even though there isn't pads on the backside of this board, there are small little holes that solder can flow through, so I do this just as an extra precaution. With the front of my frame being here, I mount this with the arm RC facing the rear. The reason for this is because if you place your main positive lead here and negative here, then the main lead is kind of overlapping this negative pad here, and the positive is overlapping this positive pad here. So just in case the silicone jacket breaks, it's not really going to hurt anything. Where if you mount it this way, the positive lead is overlapping the negative, and negative is overlapping the positive. If the jacket breaks, then you will have a problem. Now I have placed these nylon nuts on top of the bolts. The reason I use the 10mm long bolts is because if you don't use the nuts and just place these vibration absorbers on top of the bolt, these aren't really that deep, and it's going to bottom out, and then your PDB is going to be flopping around. You could use the 8mm long bolt, and that would fit, but then you're not going to have much space in between the PDB and your flight controller. So I'm using the nuts to get that extra distance. And just to be sure, I'm going to place blue Loctite on all 4 of these bolts before I place the vibration absorbers on. I've wired power and ground to all 4 of my ESCs. For 30 amp ESCs, I generally use 18 gauge wire, and for the main battery lead, I always use the same gauge wire as my thickest battery that I'll be using. In my case, some of my batteries have 12 gauge wires, and that's why I put 12 gauge on the XC60. Whenever you purchase this frame kit, it does come with 4 zip ties. I just used one of those zip ties, and there are a couple holes on the back side that you can run that zip tie through to strap the battery lead down. For the flight controller, I chose to go with the Flip 32 Omnibus F4, not the Pro version. The Pro version has the current sensor built in, but it also has those additional ground and the big ground and power pad. I just hate dealing with that. I'm not going to go into that again. And besides, I don't even use current sensors, so it's useless for me. I love all the Omnibus flight controllers because they have the built-in on-screen display that is capable of being used with Betaflight's OSD feature. And of all the on-screen displays I've used, that one is my most favorite. And I'm not talking about just the way that text looks on the screen or being able to rearrange it. I just love being able to change. I've made a video on this, and I mean, you can change your PIDs, rates, calibrate your voltage sensor, and you can do anything in the Betaflight OSD, where some OSDs have some of those features, but not nearly as many as Betaflight's OSD. Instead of wiring the signal pins to the ESCs to the typical motor outputs 1 to 4 on the board, these boards also have a connector on the backside that you can run one of these 6-wire harnesses to, and these pins are actually connected to the main pins, so it's going to be the same thing. I will remove the power and ground from this harness because I won't be using it. I'll be powering the board off of its normal VBAT pin, and then the 4 remaining wires I will run to the ESCs in the correct order. Okay, I got the ESC signal wires wired up using this 6-pin connector, but I'm only using 4 wires now. If you watched my video on how not to fry things, one thing I mentioned was the color codes being incorrect on replacement harnesses, and this is the case because the power and ground wires were the opposite side of the red and black. For the ESC ground wires, everyone has a different opinion on this. What I've always done is just solder like a 28 to 30 gauge wire onto the ground pad, and then I wrap it around the main ground wire a couple times and place it on the same pad that the main ground wire is soldered to. I don't actually put them on the flight controller, but that's up to you. Everyone has a different opinion. My favorite FPV camera is the Runcam Swift. I do know that the Runcam Swift 2 released recently, but I don't really care for the on-screen display and the ability to see your voltage because I'm using a real on-screen display. And I don't care about the microphone because the Cricket video transmitters actually have microphones built in. As far as mounting the FPV camera onto this FPV camera mount, one tip I have is Ready-Made RC actually sells additional locking rings. So I would recommend buying a few of those because once you tighten up the screw on the bottom that will hold the camera in place, it can damage your threads, which really isn't that big of a deal, but I mean, if you are worried about the lens cracking on the thread part, then you could just put an additional locking ring on and then screw the screw into that. You just want to screw it to where it's in place, line it up right here to make sure it's in the right spot, put a little bit of super glue on it to hold it in place. Now, because I removed this lens, I will have to refocus the camera once I'm completely done with everything. And the last tip I have is if you do use the Runcam Swift, it actually comes with this backing plate on it. You will have to remove that and swap it out with the other flat backing plate that comes with it. So as I mentioned before, the video transmitter is the Ready-Made RC Cricket. It's a well-known fact that this is my most favorite video transmitter. I can't tell you how many I have, I lost count. But I also like it because this frame is made specifically for this video transmitter. I get so many questions on how to wire in a camera and video transmitter into the Omnibus flight controller because yes, I do understand it has these pins here and you can have 5 volts or the full voltage of the battery going to these pins. You could just avoid every single little problem if you use a video transmitter that has a high voltage rating. This one can be powered with up to 19 or 20 volts. So what I do is run the power and ground wires going to the video transmitter right into the PDB, and it has a built-in voltage regulator, so it steps the voltage down. It also has an additional power wire that's being kicked out that will it steps it down to 5 volts, and then that power wire goes to your camera. So I run power and ground right off the PDB right into the VTX, then it's running another power and ground from the VTX to the camera. All your power problems are solved. A lot of guys do use LC filters on their video transmitters and cameras, but the Readymade RC Cricket filters the power extremely well. LC filter is not even needed. Just to prove it to you, I'm not going to put one on this build, and I will show you some flight footage later on, and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. So this is basically as easy as it can possibly get, and you're getting awesome performance. The Omnibus does have a built-in voltage regulator, so I also power this directly off the PDB. So now you understand why I use a simple PDB like this that doesn't have any voltage regulators, no LC filters, no on-screen display, no nothing. I don't need any of that. I've got the OSD in the flight controller, I've got the voltage regulator in the flight controller, voltage regulator in the video transmitter, and it doesn't need an LC filter. So using a simple PDB like this makes the wiring very, very clean, which I love, and it's also very low profile. The only wires remaining is the video wires from the camera and video transmitter. Both of these I do wire into the Omnibus to get that built-in on-screen display. Alright, so I've got everything wired up. I went ahead and added in my receiver. I'm using the Turnigy IA6C, I believe, if I remember right. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm not a fan of the size of the receiver, but I am a huge fan of the Turnigy Evolution. I mean, after purchasing this, I've only used the Tyrannus a couple of times. To mount the receiver, I just used the same mounting foam tape that I used underneath the ESCs. So now what I'm going to do is remove this electrical tape. I was only using it to hold the ESCs in place to get my measurements of the wires correct. But I'll add 2 more pieces of foam tape on top of the ESCs and then completely wrap them. The antennas of the receiver will be run alongside of the arm just like this on both sides. Always remember when you finish a build to take your multimeter and check for continuity between the positive and negative lead on your XT60 to see if you have any shorts. I've already done that and I'm good. These props are the tri-blades from Strix. These specific ones are 5 by 4.2 by 3, and the color is called Blueberry. They actually have many different colors and sizes. 5 by 4.5 by 3 in Cherry, 5 by 4 by 3 in Kiwi. Then we have a quad blade prop, 5 by 4 by 4 in Smoke. Point is, they got a bunch of different sizes and colors, so check them out. They're really good props. Last thing to do is to mount my HD camera, which I'll be using the Session. And there we go, perfect. And this strap actually does come with the CNC aluminum HD mount. You actually get 2 of the straps, as a matter of fact. That's going to do it, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, look in the description below. I will have links to all the parts used. If you have any questions, leave it for me in the comment box. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.